Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to President Trump earlier this week suggesting it wouldn't be safe for him to testify or to present his State of the Union, and that he should consider postponing it. Many people rightly interpreted that as a you're not invited anymore letter to give a State of the Union to a joint session of Congress, because the president can't just show up at the House, he has to be invited. So yesterday, Nancy Pelosi and many other members were going to go on a CODEL, which is short for a Congressional delegation. The Washington word for it is CODEL, to Afghanistan via Brussels. And the president sent a letter to Nancy Pelosi yesterday, essentially canceling the trip, while the Pelosi and her colleagues were en route to Andrews Air Force Base to get on the military plane that would bring them over. And so that caused, you might imagine, a lot of excitement here in Washington, D.C. What it reminded me of the fact that Judicial Watch is taking the lead, not only in exposing Nancy Pelosi's abuse of military travel, but generally the abuse of military travel by all of Congress through these Congressional delegations, which is these CODELs, which are just junkets paid for out of your back pocket, out of your tax dollars. So it was 10 years ago, believe it or not, it was 10 years ago that we were exposing Nancy Pelosi's abuse of military travel. There was only one scandal that I can recall that Nancy Pelosi had during her first speakership, and that was the problem she had with contending with the publicity caused by Judicial Watch's investigations and litigation exposing her abuse of military travel. She was taking military planes back and forth to her district and had some requests that were over the top and abusive. We exposed that. And then there were all sorts of other things going on that I'll get into. And that was 10 years ago. Now I'm 50, I was 40 years old when I was talking about this last. And now it's back in the news again, thanks to President Trump. So here's some of the material that we uncovered about Nancy Pelosi's travel from 10 years ago. And it's still relevant today because she's back in power again as Speaker of the House of Representatives. In response to a series of requests for military aircraft, this is a press release dated March 10th, 2009, almost exactly 10 years ago. In response to a series of requests for military aircraft, one defense, and these are documents we uncovered through litigation in our usual FOIA process. One Defense Department official wrote, "Any chance of politely querying Pelosi's team if they really intend to do all of these, or are they just picking every weekend? There's no need to block every weekend just in case." The email also notes that Pelosi's office has a history of canceling many of their past requests. So they were demanding military travel, and which caused preparation to take place for that to happen, and then canceling it. Now, you may not know this, but there's an entire wing of the Air Force, and it's part of the wing that supports the president's travel, Air Force One, and the support that probably we don't know about because it's classified, that takes place whenever the president travels. And we've exposed the cost of Air Force One of both Barack Obama and President Trump. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's an entire wing that supports VIP travel, not just for the president, who's commander-in-chief, but for senior government officials and members of Congress when they go abroad. Now, I don't necessarily begrudge a congressional delegation going into, I don't know, a war zone like Afghanistan, and them having a military plane take them in. But on the other hand, these military planes aren't the military planes you think they might be. They're not, you may have seen on the movies, or if you've served, more importantly, those of you, that military transport can be pretty threadbare. You go in these big planes, you're sitting on jump seats along the fuselage, and it's not exactly comfortable. Well, the military has an entire wing that's just essentially military versions of commercial aircraft, except they're all imagine a big commercial aircraft you typically take, but all first class or business class seats, or they have smaller Lear style jets, luxury style jets that they make available to members. And typically what happens is the speaker, for CODELs at least, authorizes the travel, or if they're minority leader, as Speaker Pelosi was for a time, they can authorize travel as well, and the military typically makes the planes available given the proper request from the proper official in the Congress. But you would think they would only do that for serious missions abroad, but instead they go anywhere they want. They've got the gumption to ask for it. The military isn't going to say no. Indeed, one DoD official complained about the hidden costs associated with the Speaker's last-minute changes and cancellations. We have folks prepping the jets and crews, driving in, not a short drive for some, cooking meals and pre-flighting the jets, etc. So that's what I tell you when I tell you about the abuse. That's the sort of abuse. So you ask for the plane and then you cancel it, and all these men and women have been working to set it up, and for what? The documents include a discussion of House ethics rules and Defense Department policies as they apply to the Speaker's request for staff, spouses, and extended family to accompany her on military aircraft. In May 2008, for example, Pelosi requested that her husband join her on a CODEL into Iraq. The DoD explained to Pelosi that the agency has a written policy prohibiting spouses from joining CODELs. So that was another issue that popped up. Her spouses and her family. And, you know, Speaker Pelosi is a mother, she's a grandmother, and so she quite rightly wants to have her family with her at times when she travels back and forth. But we subsidize that. Now, in theory, there's payments that were supposed to be made for individuals who travel with the Speaker in cases like that, but the payments don't cover the cost of travel. It's a few $100s, you know, compared to the thousands of dollars an hour it costs for the plane to run. Other documents. Documents that I'm going to go through this in detail because you won't hear about this in the media, and it provides important context for the waste, fraud, and abuse associated with congressional travel that is subsidized by military, precious military dollars. Documents obtained from the U.S. Army include correspondence from Speaker Pelosi's office requesting an Army escort and 3 military planes to transport Pelosi and other members of Congress to Cleveland for the funeral services of late Representative Stephanie Tubbs Jones. Pelosi noted in her letter of August 22, 2008, that such a request, labeled Operation Tribute, was an exception to standard policy. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine any good reason, and I remember vaguely Congressman Tubbs Jones dying, but if the members of Congress wanted to go to her funeral, they could figure out a way to get there from DC and other places. Either they can take a bus, they can take commercial travel. The idea that we were using military planes to bring these members over there is such a waste in my view. And it happens, and that sort of thing happens a lot, by the way. These military planes being used to bring members to other members who have passed away, their funeral services. The documents also detail correspondence from intermediaries for Speaker Pelosi issuing demands for certain aircraft and expressing outrage when requested military planes were not available. Now, intermediaries for Speaker Pelosi mean her staff. I don't know why we wrote it like that. It is my understanding that there are no G5s available for the House during the Memorial Day recess. This is totally unacceptable. The Speaker will want to know where the planes are, wrote Kay King, Director of the House Office of Interparliamentary Affairs. In a separate email, when told a certain type of aircraft would not be available, King writes, "This is not good news, and we will have some very disappointed folks, as well as a very upset Speaker." Talk about arrogance and abuse. Can you imagine being an Air Force official dealing with the Speaker's office on this? You've got limited resources. There are a fleet of jets over there, but it's not an infinitely sized one. And there are other reasons to keep those jets available, usually to support the Commander-in-Chief when he travels. And they're shaking in their boots as they're being yelled at through email by Speaker Pelosi's staff demanding access to this luxury jet program. And this is a kicker. This one has always gotten me. It's 10 years ago, but I remember this and you'll know why. During another email exchange, DoD staff advised Kay King, again Pelosi's front, that one Pelosi military aircraft request could not be met because of, quote, Crew West requirements, and offered to help secure commercial travel. Let's say commercial travel. King responded, "We appreciate the efforts to help the CODEL fly commercially, but you know the problem that creates with spouses. If we can find another way to assist with military assets, we would like to do that." Now, what's the dirty little secret there? This is the line. You know the problem that creates with spouses. Spouses could go on the military planes on these international or national CODELs for free. But if they took commercial travel, they had to pay their own way. So they were trying to game the system in order to get the spouses free travel to go on this congressional delegation trip. So, and I haven't seen the reporting on this, and I have to look more into it. But you know, you guys get to comment on this. Comment on this. Go ahead and Google. Figure out who else was going on this congressional delegation trip. Were spouses invited? You can bet if they were invited, they were going for free. Now, admittedly, they may not want to go to Afghanistan, but who knows? Maybe they thought it was interesting. But of course, they were going to Afghanistan through Brussels, which they didn't need a military plane to get to. But that's a whole other matter. So, you know, now back in 2007, this is why Pelosi got into the news on the military travel, because Dennis Hastert had airplane military access as well, but he was much more conservative in how he treated this perk of office. She requested allegedly a 42-seat Air Force carrier to ferry the Speaker and her staff back and forth between San Francisco and you know, Hastert was happy with a 12-seater. So Miss Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, wanted a bigger plane, and this is the way that worked. And I remember the story came out in 2007. This is almost immediately after she took control of the House of Representatives and became Speaker. The election in 2006, in which she was going to, quote, drain the swamp, she comes in 2007, or takes power in 2007, and the Washington Times had a story about this kerfuffle because she was stepping on toes over at the Air Force with these demands for bigger planes. And so what happened is the media rushed to her defense and stamped the story out. But I remember quite specifically thinking, well, we're not going to let this drop. We're going to figure out what really went on. And that led to our Freedom of Information Act request and lawsuits that uncovered the full truth about what was going on. So leave it to Judicial Watch to do all the work that the liberal media not only doesn't refuse to do, but either doesn't want to do or actively covers things up by refusing to report on. And certainly Congress wasn't going to do anything. This is another fun detail. One CODEL, this document we came up with later in 2010, one CODEL traveling from D.C. through Tel Aviv to Baghdad to discuss matters of mutual concern with government leaders, including members of Congress and their spouses. It costs $17,000 per hour in aircraft alone. Purchases for the CODEL include Johnny Walker Red Scotch, Grey Goose vodka. As you might imagine, I'm not a heavy drinker, so E&J Brandy, I've never had that, Bailey's Irish Cream, Maker's Mark Whiskey, Courvoisier Cognac, Bacardi Light Rum, Jim Beam Whiskey, Beefeater Gin, Dewar's Scotch, Bombay Sapphire Gin, Jack Daniel's Whiskey, Corona Beer, and several bottles of wine. Now, I don't know about you. I travel. I hate traveling, but I do travel for Judicial Watch. The idea that I would get on a plane and start spending Judicial Watch money on alcohol like that, I'd probably cut my arm off before that would happen. Yet this is the expectation on a CODEL to a war zone. Was Baghdad a war zone at the time? Yeah, probably. That was the list. And we have all the receipts, so you can go online and look at these various documents that I'm talking about. According to a memo for the record, there was a CODEL that involved a stop in, let's see, in Israel. They could only bring kosher items to the hotel, which is understandable. But again, kosher alcohol for mixing beverages in the delegation room was purchased on the local economy, meaning once they got there, bourbon, whiskey, scotch, vodka, gin, triple sec tequila, etc. I don't know. Maybe I'm too old, but I don't remember drinking like that even when I was younger. My gosh. So, and on top of, let's see what else we have here. We got a bunch of releases come out. Oh, this is another local CODEL that I'll just leave you with. January 7th, 2011-2010, Congressional delegation to Detroit, Michigan, for the express purpose of reviewing the impact of congressional appropriations and policy in promoting innovation, technological development, and job creation in the U.S. auto industry. It cost $24,000 in commercial travel, so the military didn't pick that up, but you picked it up, and $10,000 in expenses. Oh wait, the military did pick up part of it because we sent military escorts with them. So we had senior Air Force officials escorting Congress to Detroit. My guess it was the auto show. I read this to mean the auto show, but maybe it was just more generalized meetings. So that's the Pelosi Congress and CODELs. And you can bet it continued during the Boehner Congress. Now John Boehner, the Speaker, thanks to Judicial Watch, he said, I'm not using military planes. And I believe Speaker Ryan confirmed that with us as well. They didn't use military planes, at least to travel back and forth to their home districts. Now, there are CODELs that took place during the Republican-controlled Congress, which we've investigated. And I actually will have some more on that for you next week. But there was a CODEL for Mrs. Pelosi, again, while she was in Congress, that involved a trip to Italy, which I'll talk about next week as well. But it never really stopped. So the president is right to call attention to the wasteful use of the wasteful CODELs. I mean, we can argue whether or not members of Congress should be going to Afghanistan on taxpayer dollars, what the value of it is, but we do have a government shutdown. And government shutdowns are useful not only because they save us money, but also because they highlight the fact that government is doing a lot of things it doesn't really need to do. And by calling attention to the CODELs, at least we have a debate about the fact we have our military providing VIP luxury travel for our Congress.